Hello viewers, welcome to the program. I'm Rohit Vyas and you're watching us, of course, coast to coast throughout North America. This gentleman is a career diplomat from the Indian Foreign Service. During his career spanning more than 35 years, he has held a variety of positions in New Delhi and overseas. Most recently, he was India's High Commissioner to Bangladesh. He's also been the Ambassador of India to the Kingdom of Thailand. And we know him from his prior stint at the Permanent Mission of India to the United Nations. Please welcome India's new ambassador to Washington, D.C., here in the United States, Ambassador Harsh Vardhan Shringla. Thank you, sir, for joining us on TV Asia. What a pleasure to have you back here in the United States.
It's great to be back, and particularly with TV Asia.
Thank you, sir. Now, you've assumed charge, as I said, as I was thinking, at a time when U.S.-India relations are extremely strong, doing very well in every sphere, whether it's trade, defense, foreign policy, international strategy, discussing terrorism, global terrorism, things like that. Your predecessors have worked to make this happen. You come at a time when relations probably haven't been stronger than we see them today. Do you feel in any way sort of there's an extra burden on you to now live up to this momentum and build on it going further ahead?
Well, I've been here for about a month, and from what I've seen, the relations have come very far and very fast. I think it's over the last 10 to 15 years that we've seen the maximum increases in terms of the depth and extent of our relationship. Obviously, there are plenty of opportunities to take this forward to its next level. There are also potential challenges. It is our job to try and see how we can best steer the relationship to a level that is even better than what it is today.
So I see you don't even feel any kind of pressure. You're so cool and calm and ready to go sail right into it, isn't it?
Well, certainly. I think from our perspective, it is a relationship that has tremendous potential, and it's our endeavor to try and see how we can, take that potential to the level that you'd like it to over the next few years.
Let's start with trade. There have been some bumps along the way, and it's not just with India, but with China, many other countries under the Trump administration. It's because of the U.S. administration's tariffs policies. And there was a lot of talk that China had too many tariffs, India had too many tariffs. Have those issues been smoothed out over the last 2 years of this administration here?
Well, trade has been an important part of the relationship. We are among the top 10 trade partners of the United States, and the U.S. is our top trade partner. Trade has also increased very significantly. In 2018 alone, bilateral trade increased by 18%, and U.S. exports to India increased by 28%. So it's very significant at a time when global trade is at a downswing. We have also focused on trying to see how we can buy more from the United States to address the adverse trade balance. And I'm happy to say that the trade balance, which was 26 billion in 2016, has come down to 19 billion in just 2 years. That's because we are buying a lot more from the US. We've also had several rounds of talks on trade negotiations, and we hope that we can come up with a rationalized system of tariffs that can be mutually beneficial.
And do you feel Washington has been more accessible to India now in these discussions, and that they're coming around to believing that India is working toward a balanced trade between the two nations?
It takes two hands to clap, and we've been engaged in these discussions. We're also happy that the Commerce Secretary is leading a very significant delegations of CEOs of US companies to India next week. He will have talks with our Commerce, Industry and Civil Aviation Minister. They will also be co-chairs of the US-India CEOs Forum meeting.
Okay, now let's talk about investments in both countries. I think you addressed this at a community meeting when you took over as India's ambassador. Investments, how much, India has been seeking investment from American entities, American companies for a while. And the United States, under President Donald Trump, has been seeking to do the same thing. They want other nations to start investing here in the Make America Great Again plan. Can you give us an idea of what the figures are in terms of investment? US investments in India and Indian investments and future investments here in the United States?
Well, we've done quite well in that area because we've had as many as a very large number of Indian companies that have invested as much as $20 billion in the United States. You've had US companies that have invested over $40 billion in India. So the two-way investment profile has been very successful, I would say, and rapidly expanding. So there is a great amount of interest in trade and investments on both sides. Companies are seeing advantages in a market of 1.3 billion people in India. And of course, Indian companies also see an advantage in the United States, particularly in terms of high technology manufacturing. I've met a number of our companies and some of whom plan to increase their investment significantly over the next year or two in the United States.
Now, India has been largely dependent on foreign oil, crude oil imports to meet its needs. Iran, sanctions were on Iran. India got a lot of its oil from the nation of Iran. India was lucky to be given one of the countries that was given an exemption to allow it to meet its oil needs from Iran. Will India be looking at other sources for its oil needs? And will India be looking to bring in more oil from here in the United States, which is what the administration is trying to do, is to send more of the oil and other types of fuels to foreign countries?
Well, if you noticed in his State of the Union address last evening, President Trump said that for the first time, the US had become a net exporter of energy. And I think we have a lot to do with that. We have started importing oil and gas from the United States. We have imported $4.5 billion worth of oil and gas. We have a commitment to do that annually. We feel we can significantly increase those figures, but provided the export infrastructure for oil and gas in the United States is developed to that capacity. And we believe that is underway. So perhaps even $4.5 billion is something that we can do better on. But this is a very good start, and we are very happy with the fact that the United States has become one of our significant suppliers of oil and natural gas.
And as an addendum to that, are there any efforts to increase offshore oil exploration in India itself, so that India doesn't have to be that dependent anymore?
Of course, we are always looking at possibilities of the exploration and exploitation of petroleum and oil reserves, not just in India, both onshore and offshore, but also in other countries. We have invested significantly in countries like Vietnam, in Central Asian countries, even in Bangladesh, in Myanmar, in exploiting petroleum reserves.
Our guest is Ambassador Harsh Vardhan Shringla, India's new ambassador to Washington, D.C. Not really new, but he recently took over charge. We'll be right back after the short commercial break. And welcome back, viewers. Our guest once again is Ambassador Harsh Vardhan Shringla. He is India's new ambassador to Washington, D.C. Ambassador, a number of U.S. multinational corporations are led by Indian CEOs. You mentioned a CEO conference and things like that coming up within the next week or so. And I imagine you believe that Indian CEOs play a major role in helping two-way business between these two countries. How critical a role do you really feel, and does the Indian government feel these CEOs of these multinationals play? And we have so many of them now in place in American companies.
Well, it's a matter of great pride to us Indians to see that our fellow citizens are people who of Indian origin have done so well in the United States, leading multinational companies that are known the world over. And clearly, they are not only very talented individuals to have reached the top of the corporate ladder on a global basis, but also people who understand both the United States and India very well. And as a result of which they can leverage their experience of both countries to the advantage of their companies and the advantage of the countries involved. So we would like to see them play a more proactive role in promoting US investments, or multinational investments into India. And we do believe that certainly with their vision of how their companies can look at the Indian market as a potential source of rapid expansion, we can welcome them in particular.
So they also play a very important role then in bringing investments to India as well, don't they?
They have done that, and we look forward to their doing that in the future as well.
All right, let's talk about defense. The United States and India have several strategic defense agreements in place right now. The two work very closely in a number of areas in defense. Are you expecting India to step up defense purchases over the next year or two, especially during your term here in the United States?
Well, defense has been a major area of cooperation between our two countries. We today participate in joint exercises of various kinds. We have plans to upgrade that into trilateral exercises involving HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster response objectives. We are looking at training and capacity building. We are looking at technology transfers. We are looking at innovations in defense technologies. One of the areas that we have worked on is also defense supplies. We have certainly diversified our defense imports to include US defense items. I was personally present at the Boeing facility in Philadelphia to receive the first of the Chinook helicopters that the US is supplying us, our Indian Air Force. So from that perspective, I think we have an expanding and rapidly developing relationship in the defense sector.
So India has its Look East policy. The United States has its own Asia Pacific region policy. The two countries are working very closely on defense matters in that region. Now, is that going to make for a more balanced world order, do you believe? The United States, India working in that entire Asia Pacific region, the Indian Ocean and beyond, the South China Sea, areas like that. Is that helping strengthen the world order?
Well, we do believe that we have been a country that has been a first responder and a net security provider in the Indo-Pacific area. We have been, by first responder, I mean in terms of natural calamities. To give you some instances, when there was a huge drinking water shortage in the Maldives, we were the first, our ships were the first to provide drinking water as an emergency sort of supply to Male. When there was an earthquake, a cyclone in Sri Lanka, our ships were the first to provide relief. When the Rohingya refugees came in very large numbers from Myanmar into Bangladesh, we were among the first to provide emergency humanitarian relief. We believe that, and we've gone as far as Indonesia in Banda Aceh to provide relief in the wake of the tsunami. So we've been active, whether it is in Africa, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in our immediate neighborhood, in providing both, as first responders and net security, making sure that the shipping lanes are free of piracy, making sure that there is security in international shipping. And we believe that we would work with like-minded countries like the United States in ensuring that the international global order, the emphasis on international law, freedom of navigation, freedom of open spaces is respected and protected, and that we are both working towards a free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific region in cooperation with our other friends and partners.
This strategic relationship between the United States and India appears to have helped both countries jointly fight terrorism. And is this helping India especially check terrorism operating against it from foreign soil?
Global terrorism is one that has to be dealt with multinationally. And certainly, I think we have worked very closely with the United States through institutional mechanisms. We have a joint working group on counterterrorism. We have separate mechanisms between our two countries that not only deal with the issue of terrorism, the designation of terrorist entities, also in terms of dealing with financial terrorism. And I think that is a very effective way of, I think, mutually helping each other in understanding where the terrorist threats lie, in providing information exchanges, capacity building, and also ultimately in directly addressing such threats operationally wherever required.
Our guest is Ambassador Harsh Vardhan Shringla, India's ambassador to Washington, D.C. We'll be right back after a very short break. And welcome back. Our guest is India's ambassador to the United States, Harsh Vardhan Shringla. Ambassador, the United States government has tightened its immigration rules in the last couple of years. In fact, the administration is calling for stricter vetting of those who apply for visas. Is this affecting potential Indian tourists coming into the United States, do you think?
Well, from what I understand, we contribute about close to 150,000 tourists that come to the US every year. The US is a popular tourism destination from India. Indian tourists are law-abiding. They spend a lot of time visiting places, and of course, as they do that, they contribute to tourism in far-flung areas of the US. So I think they are a good source of tourism revenue. It also is a source of enhanced people-to-people contacts when you have people actually coming to each other's countries. The United States is the second largest source of tourists into India, so it's a very good exchange, and we would like that to continue.
Now, you recently also talked about students going to colleges here and therefore bringing in tuition for the institutions in this country, a lot of them coming from India. But these visa rules seem to be dissuading a lot of Indian students from coming to the United States for higher learning, higher education. Do you think this is going to be a problem in the future for institutions here in the United States? And do you think Indian students might start looking elsewhere if the visa rules get too tight? And are there any discussions between your government and the United States government to sort of ameliorate this situation?
Well, we have about 227,000 Indian students who contribute about $6.5 billion to the academic community in the United States. Clearly, we constitute one of the largest sources of foreign students in the US. Indian students come here mainly to pursue STEM studies, and I think they find that the education system here offers them a great deal of opportunities. It's important that the system that provides for such a large number of students to come in and then go back to India and contribute in their own ways continues in a manner that is least, let us say, inconvenient to the students. Now, you had a system where H-1B visas were given to those who had completed their studies. They wanted some time to have some exposure on the ground, some experience which is linked to their academic pursuits. It also helps the industry here because there's a very large amount invested in technology. You need a source of relatively skilled labor that can handle those high-tech jobs that are required. America today is at a very low rate of unemployment. President Trump said so in a State of the Union address. This is a segment which can contribute greatly and is contributing greatly to the economy. They're not here to stay. They're here to only pick up experience. And so there needs to be greater clarity on the H-1B. There needs to, I think you have to make sure that this very important segment that is contributing so much to America's cutting-edge technological development is maintained. I saw an article in the Washington Post which talked about a lot of Indian students who are not accessing the H-1B visa going elsewhere. Some of them also felt that new rules and regulations that made it much more stringent make it easier for them to go to other centers. There are attempts to create a parallel Silicon Valley in Canada, for example. So students will go where there are best opportunities for them, not only to study, but also to develop a certain amount of expertise. So we have to see this very carefully and look at it from the point of view of mutual benefit. What is in our best interests? Is it simply to keep everybody out, or is to ensure that you have the optimum requirements, your optimum conditions for your industry to do well, and particularly high-tech and high-end industry?
And in relation to that, I wanted to bring up this question because you've been addressing it, hands-on. Recently, it emerged that ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency here, had created this university, Farmington University. A number of the Indian students who were arrested in this connection, were all Indian. They were all Indian students. And you've been addressing this issue very strongly. Are these students getting enough help from the government of India? Is the United States cooperating with India in this matter to see which students may have been innocent and which may not have been?
Well, we have been responsive to the needs of our students who've been detained under the Farmington University case. We have, I think, got consular access to almost all the students that are involved. You have to keep in mind that they were spread over 36 detention centers all over the country. Our people have gone to each of these centers, proactively met the students concerned. We have tried to assist them. We have tried to make sure that their conditions for detention were appropriate. We have tried to provide them with the legal assistance that is required. And we've also been engaged with the concerned authorities, the Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, ICE officials, to try and see how we can best resolve this issue in the mutual interests of both countries.
You've already credited, and so have many people from India, credited Indian Americans generally with helping bring closer ties, both these countries closer together. We have second and third generation Americans, Indians, who are born in this country, who probably many of whom have not even visited India. As we look into the future, do you see a role for these young Indian Americans in continuing this process that the first generation had engaged in bringing closer ties to these two nations?
No, certainly. The first generation has a different involvement because they're more emotionally tied. But second and third generations also understand that this is the country that they come from. So you have a country of origin and you have a country of citizenship. And I do believe that second and third generation Indians in the United States will also be closely attached to India, because we have the examples of Indian communities in places like South Africa, in Guyana, in Malaysia, who are also, despite being third and fourth generation immigrants, have close links with India, with their mother country. It's also incumbent on us to reach out to them, to ensure that they also feel that there is an attachment. And there are several schemes, and particularly under the government of Prime Minister Modi, the outreach to the community has been a high priority. The outreach to the Indian diaspora all over the world. The United States has been a very good example, where the Prime Minister himself has gone out and met in very large groups of the community, not just in Madison Square Garden, but in other parts of the United States. He reached out to them. We've had programs that cater to second and third generations of the community, the Know India program, the Bharat Ko Janiye quiz, many different programs that are tailor-made to suit younger generations of Indians who are born outside of India. And we will continue to do that proactively to ensure that we also draw these second, third generation, younger generations of people in a more inclusive fashion to their country of origin.
I want to thank you, Ambassador Shringla, for joining us on TV Asia, taking the time out to give us a lot of your time on this show. Thank you so much, sir, and good luck as you take on a very big responsibility here in Washington.
Thank you so very much to TV Asia for your support, and we look forward to being in touch.
And thank you, viewers, for watching. Our guest once again was Ambassador Harsh Vardhan Shringla, India's ambassador to Washington, D.C. Thank you all for watching. I'm Rohit Vyas.